Juiced 2. It's a game about legalizing anabolic steroids. Wait. It's a game that was delicately crafted by a combined team of evolutionary scientists and sexually repressed game designers, resulting in a product that triggers hidden monkey brain receptors in all male subjects exposed to the gamma radiation that this game emits from your monitor upon startup. This game has everything that a male fantasy could ever envision. There are cars. And there are women.
Is that your fantasy?
Need I go on? Well, yes, because Juiced 2, Hot Import Nights, was nonetheless the last game in this short-lived franchise of tuner culture track racing video games. And in a world where Need for Speed would continue to see wild success even after shifting from its open world format into the likes of Pro Street and Shift, what exactly was it about Juiced 2 that simultaneously made it a cult classic amongst fans of the genre, whilst also making itself not worthy of a third game? Before talking about the game proper, there are a few technical things I have to mention before we go further. Juiced 2 suffers from a god-awful PC port. Not only does this game show you Xbox controller button prompts when playing with a mouse and keyboard, but the vanilla game is also locked at 30 FPS and a 4:3 ratio. Surely there's a patch to fix this though, right? I mean, people have made widescreen fixes for much older and more obscure games than this one. Well, here's the thing. The PC Gaming Wiki thankfully has a pretty extensive list of fixes available for this game. But it is here that I found out that not only does it take editing the game's executable with a hex editor to change both its aspect ratio and refresh rate, the side effect of this tampering is that your physics get screwed up. At higher frame rates, it is reported that cars have reduced acceleration and more grip, with less nitrous being awarded for power slides. This is a bottom-of-the-barrel PC port, the likes of which we may likely never see again. But please, do not fret. 'Tis not far from Christmas, after all. If you still want to give the game a go, but cannot be fucked playing a 15-year-old game at 30 FPS, and you don't want to screw around with a hex editor, no! Fear not. This absolute legend has you covered with all the files you need to play the game at 1920 by 1080p with a choice of either 60 FPS or 120 plus. I've personally been playing this game with the 120 FPS fix, and while I can't see a difference with the way the physics work, I can at least say that the game is very much playable like this. But if you're worried about the physics getting screwed up, then you can always try the 60 FPS version, which shouldn't be that different from the original game, in any real way that matters anyway. I also didn't bother with the proper widescreen ratio fix. Fucking sue me. I've always had fond memories of Juiced 2. I played it around the time it came out on PC, and I really liked it for a number of reasons that are still completely valid today, and I will talk plenty about those later. The thing is, my videos tend to end on all of the worst aspects of the games I review, so to switch it up a little, please allow me like 5 minutes to shit on this game. It doesn't take a lot of effort to find things to complain about because it all starts from the moment you create a new profile and realize that the character models from Juiced 2 were based off of Wallace and Gromit plasticine looking ants. It's kind of a staple of older games for me to have tons of features purely for the sake of having a lot of features. Not only does creating your character not really have any real gameplay reason behind it, it also looks like absolute shit, and honestly I wish they just didn't bother. There are plenty of other redundant mechanics of this nature in Juiced 2 by the way, so brace yourself. I know they do this weird driver DNA stuff that I'll talk about later, but that could have just been directed at you. Me? The player, instead of the greasy melt of a character you made. This obviously extends to all the other character models in the game. They're all stricken with the same disease that your character is likely responsible for spreading around, not to even mention the voice acting.
That's cool. Just one thing. Keep the bumping and grinding for the dance floor. Good. Now prepare for poverty.
Alas, meet Mimosa Steve. Fresh out of experimental Bosnian chemotherapy, he's eager to prove himself in the Hot Import Nights League. But you see, chemo comes with a price, and the price that Steve had to pay was the total wiping out of his DNA. This whole DNA mechanic is literally the first thing that Ursula Mays, played of course by Ursula Mays, explains to you in the game after you've created your character. And it's made out to be a big deal. Like, holy crap, the game is tracking my playstyle and editing my character's DNA depending on how aggressive or precise my driving is. Sounds like some complicated stuff. Surely, this is going to greatly affect my gameplay experience as time goes on. right? Sure, maybe in multiplayer this was a somewhat cool feature. You could tell how an opponent was going to drive before you ever raced against them, kind of similar to how you can look at the AI DNA in the single-player career mode to see who to place bets against and who might be more susceptible to the old rubber band trick. But your personal DNA, as things are now, is a complete nothing burger. But you know what? Fuck that multiplayer hypothesis. Because I've not even mentioned how hard it is to gain aggression points in the DNA system. I can swear that anytime I've made a new character in Juice 2, not once did I end up with a full orange helix like some of the AI characters have. I don't want to say it's impossible to do, but it would have to be something you go out of your way to do hardcore. Basically, if you're consistently winning events throughout the game, which, trust me, it's quite easy to do, your DNA is always going to look like this. After the intro, we're thrown into our first pre-event, where we are introduced to two of these nothing characters. Tyrone, Albuquerque, New Mexico, who of course calls himself the Storm. So fucking lame. And on the other hand, we have Crystal Simmons. Probably from that one haram website. Now, here's the thing. Before every race, you have the chance to challenge any of the participating drivers to a bet. The amount of money you can wager increases the higher you progress up the leagues. By about League 4, you can be walking away from every event with an extra $50,000 to $75,000. And this is important because you don't even have to finish first in the events to make a shitload of money. All you have to do is beat the soon-to-be bankrupt T you bet against, making accumulating money in this game incredibly easy. But throwing money at a random racer in each event is too inefficient for my liking. You need to know who to place your bets against. The game forces you to bet against Crystal in the first event after character selection. Seeing how you have nothing to lose, you'll probably wager the maximum amount of $5,000. I mean, we're not exactly short on cash here. She will then instantly bitch out and half your bet, instantly blacklisting herself from ever being talked to again. Tyrone, on the other hand, well, basically, anytime you see him competing, you should be placing a wager against him as he is guaranteed to raise every single time, meaning he's single-handedly going to put my kids through college. Yet for now, we're stuck with Miss Chump Change. And finally, after 7 minutes into this video about a racing game, it's time to do some racing. And how is the racing in Juice 2 exactly? I mean, I've played worse games than this, I guess. I think the main problem with the driving in Juice 2 comes down to mass, or rather, the lack thereof. You can buy a stock Corolla or Focus and take it around 90-degree turns at 100-odd miles per hour, whilst maintaining pretty much perfect grip. This is strange, not only because it makes the game a lot less challenging and fun, but also because the only way to earn nitrous in this game is through power slides. You would think that, for this reason, maybe it would be a little easier to slide your back out when you're doing 100 plus around a bend, but what we have instead feels more akin to driving a Scalextric's car around the track. And no, it's not much better in the unmodified 30 FPS version of the executable. The one main difference is that when you do eventually get a big enough slide, you earn a considerably bigger amount of nitrous. Not that you can't get any in the 120 FPS version, it just takes a lot more effort through very aggressive handbrake turns. Another reason for the kinda crappy feel of the controls is how sensitive some of them are. I think we should look at a similar game that does this a lot better for comparison. I was surprised coming back to Need for Speed Underground for the first time in like 2 decades and seeing just how good the driving in that game still holds up. It's not super realistic by any means, but the cars in that game feel like exactly what they are. That being thousands of pounds of metal hurling down narrow city streets. A big factor in this equation is of course the weight of the vehicles. Take a turn on too quickly and you might just end up slamming into another car or a barrier off to the side, the former being a pretty big deal most of the time and likely having you scrambling for the restart button. But the other big difference here is how slowly your car turns at high speeds, leaving around a full second between pressing a turn button and the car actually fully steering in that direction. This is a great way of both making steering less of a chore, making it much easier to make small adjustments, but it also punishes you for driving recklessly, because if you're coming around the corner and see a van coming straight at you, then it should really be your fault for driving on the other side of the road. Now, take literally everything that I just said there in the last minute and apply the complete opposite to Juice 2. Cars turn and stop on a dime, they stick to the track as if their tires came with Gorilla Glue pre-applied, and there's really very little consequences to the player's shitty driving. All cars have a damage model, and one might be persuaded by all the pieces of your vehicle flying off after hitting obstacles to think that this might actually affect how they drive, when in actual fact, it's all purely cosmetic. Hitting other contestants' cars feels extremely unsatisfying also, it really just goes back to the whole mass thing. Other cars put up almost zero resistance when you try to ram them, like you're not even riding grinding up against anything at all. And hitting walls and barriers is almost a complete non-issue. Grinding up against them barely slows you down at all. All of this adds up to a very subpar driving game experience, and that's without even mentioning the level design of a lot of the tracks, the vast majority of which feel far too wide, ridiculously so at times. It's to the point that even if all of the other negatives I have mentioned so far remain the same, replacing some of these track segments with narrower streets with some hairpin turns or something to that effect would have balanced the game out to be a lot more enjoyable. As it stands, there's barely any challenge. These tracks feel like they should have trucks racing through them with the amount of room they allow, not tuner cars. Now, I've seen complaints regarding rubber banding amongst other people who have reviewed Juiced 2, and while it is present, I don't really mind it that much in this instance. I mean, sure, there's times where it gets annoying, but whenever an AI car gains a lot of speed out of nowhere, you'll notice that they're always using nitrous, and since I also have that ability, I don't really have much of a problem with it. Besides, blocking is always a valid strategy. There's this one mechanic in your standard racing mode that I want to mention, but there's no real good place for me to talk about it, so here it is, I guess. You may notice this bar popping up over cars that you're tailgating. This is called spooking. It is especially effective when performed in upper-end German cars with big, bright, fuck-off LED lights, and will cause drivers to spin out when completely filled up. It's pretty dumb. Like, how do you expect to enter a fucking racing tournament if you freak out when there's a car behind you for more than 10 seconds? You know, I take that back, actually. I'd shit myself too if I saw Mimosa Steve through my rearview mirror. So you're gonna do your first race, and you're going to absolutely smoke the competition. The starter car that the game gives you for the first two events just completely outclasses anything that the other contestants are using. And most people who either just won, or anyone watching this video up until now, may be wondering, is there actually anything worthwhile in this game? Well, I'm glad you asked. We are introduced to the Drift event as our second tutorial level, and these are probably the most fun events in the game in my opinion. It's to the point that whenever I advance to a new league, I go out of my way to clear all of the Drift events first to break up the monotony of the lackluster circuit racing that makes up the majority of the game. And it's funny really, because it's probably not even that good, especially compared to some other games. It's just that it's really hard to make drifting not enjoyable in games like this. Chaining massive combos that go up into the millions of points simply doesn't get very tiring that quickly. It does take some getting used to. The car's physics in this mode are different from those in the racing events. Kind of like how all the Need for Speed games that had this event type did it as well. Except, Juiced 2 has its own weird quirks, such as how much faster you accelerate when going sideways, almost feeling like someone strapped rocket boosters to your sides. However, the mode is brought down in the early game by giving you childishly low score goals. I mean, fair enough, this is basically the tutorial that introduces you to the mode for the first time, as well as still introducing you to the game itself. But 10,000 points is literally fucking nothing. Like, look at this. That was a 10,000 point drift right there. And I finished this event with over 1 million, chaining the same drift since the beginning of that clip. I will give the game credit though, drift events where there are other drivers competing against you on the track at the same time are quite challenging. If you hit a wall, which cuts your accumulated points by half, you may not be able to recover. But challenging single drift racing events are few and far between, even near the end of the game. The level design of the drift maps are pretty ridiculous, by the way. The first one is a track built around the fucking Eiffel Tower, which brings me on to my first ever game theory on this channel. I sincerely believe that the Nazis were the victors of World War II in the Juiced 2 universe. I mean, a drift track around the Eiffel Tower? Show me a more plausible explanation, atheists. But overall, the drift events are pretty fun. And after finishing these first two events in the game, you are brought into the career menu, where you are robbed of your whip and required to purchase a new one. And here is where Juiced 2 shows off one of its biggest strengths. There are just under 90 vehicles represented in surprisingly good detail for the time, with a good mix of muscle cars, JDM legends, including 3 variations of the Skyline, Toyota Supra, Imprezas, and Evos. There's also a good amount of more obscure choices. If you want to compete in a Citroen C2 or a Seat Leon, be my guest. If anything is missing, it's on the supercar side. There's cars such as the Dodge Viper or Pagani Zonda, but there's only about 2 or 3 more cars of a similar pedigree. It almost seems like a waste of space actually, because there are some really cool car manufacturers in Juiced 2, ones that you don't normally see in other racing games. You have a Holden and a Vauxhall showing up to represent the Queen's Commonwealth, God rest her soul. And I feel like the few supercars that are present could have been dropped in favor of some other filthy wagons. I would have loved to go drifting around in something like an Opel Corsa, for example. Here is a hub tip for after you buy your first car. Ignore the events for the time being, and get ready for what is probably the weirdest car upgrade mechanic I have seen in any racing video game ever. There are 3 areas in which you can improve your cars in Juiced 2, that being power, handling, and weight. You'll notice that the cars come with level 1 pre-installed for them all, with levels 2 and 3 being locked currently. Now, what I didn't know playing this game when I was much younger was that you can select the next padlocked upgrade from the one you currently have installed, and you can just unlock it by completing a challenge. This is a very bizarre way of having an upgrade system for one main reason. These challenges are most often either time attack stages, or 1v1s against budget stake driving a car that will always outperform your one by miles, like it's not even close. At the very least, you always get a jump start of a few seconds. The reason for why this is so weird is that some of these time attacks are brutal. Some of them I wasn't even able to finish. And you know what would have helped in shaving off just those few extra seconds? It is too often the case that the upgrade that I'm trying to unlock is downright required to complete the race to unlock said upgrade. Name me another game that does something anywhere near close to this. I struggle to even think of a hypothetical example. Like, imagine in Chivalry 2, in order to unlock the longbow, you first had to finish a 1v5 against a group of bot archers, but you yourself are only armed with your fists. Having the bow would have been a tremendous help, but now, even if you manage to beat the bots and get the bow, none of it matters anymore. It's like they looked at the driving tests in the Gran Turismo games and decided they needed to have them in the game as well, without realizing why the challenges in those games work. Basically, try to unlock as many of these upgrades as you can, but if you get stuck on any particular one, just don't worry about it. The racing events are quite easy to cheese even in stock cars. And just to put the final nail in the coffin of the performance upgrade system, once you unlock the next tier of upgrade for power and handling, you get to select what brand of hardware we want to install. This is one of those non-features I mentioned earlier on in the video. It would have been cool if each brand had their own specific stats, like you could pick Falcon tires for more oversteer around sharp corners, or Bridgestone if you preferred maximum grip or something. But that would have required more development time, something that they didn't really get while making this game. The only thing that this succeeds in doing is turning your upgrade into a 5-button press ordeal, as opposed to just one. It's nothing more than a waste of time. Fuck, man, I can't finish this on a bad note again. Here is the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video in detail, and thankfully it's good news. Car customization in this game is good. It's funny that a game with characters that look like they've been pulled out of Trisha Paytas' ass excels in this department, but credit needs to be given where it's due. There are plenty of customization options that you would expect in Need for Speed and other such games, but this game goes further in many regards. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that Juice 2 has a cockpit camera, placing you behind the steering wheel. This was a massive perk for me when I was younger, as Need for Speed didn't really have that in its 2000s releases. You'd have to go back to the likes of Porsche Unleashed for that. The thing is that this interior view brought with it custom steering wheels, racing seats, wing doors, just to name a few. Yes, you can put wing doors on a shitbox if you so desire. There's some very nice looking paint job options too. The pearlescent paint style always blew me away back in the day. I couldn't believe it was a real thing you could actually go out and get. And while you're spending some time pimping your ride, your ears will be soothed by the game's menu OST, some of which I've already played throughout this video. And I have to include this one just because it reminds me of this. Now, vinyls are pretty low res, unfortunately, but that's pretty standard for the time that this game came out. I always thought they looked tacky anyway, so I don't really mind. Everything else that is on offer here more than makes up for it, I think. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I mean, there are a few more things I could mention, like the crew mechanic, for example, where some races require you to have a teammate. I tried this mode once. I finished first, and my teammate brought me down to like 3rd place. I instantly fired them and never tried that event type again. And there's also the fact that cars have a cap on which league they can compete in. Some of the starter cars can only be used up until around League 5 or 4, which is a bit shit. I would have loved to be able to beat the whole game in a Corolla, for example. But, I mean, no one watches these videos from start to finish, right? Type these nuts in the comments right this second. I enjoyed my time revisiting Juiced 2. It's not amazing, but it's fun enough driving and drifting around the place, making fat stacks of cash and customizing the many different cars the game has to offer. But, Hub, where can I get this game? All I will say is that Juiced 2 is considered abandonware. And now, it's my abandonware.com. I've been Scav Merchant Hub, and alcohol makes driving more fun. See ya!
I want you to subscribe to me
Scav Merchant Hub
on YouTube. Thank you, cringe.